Okay guys, on your desk is your warm-up. As with every bell ringer, there is no right or wrong answer. We are going to understand the roles and responsibilities of war crimes today, leading into our Cali trial. So go ahead for the first part right here. What I want you to do is, and this is based on your own personal beliefs and values. So it's you and yours alone. Okay? You're going to number 1 through 5. Whether you strongly agree all the way to undecided on each one of these questions. We'll reflect in a little bit. Then part 2 of your warm-up is, I have 4 options here. I want you to rank from 1 through 4 your preference. Okay? Number 1 obviously being your first, 4 being your last. Okay? That's your warm-up. Go ahead and hit that. Okay? Jimmy, will you do me a favor? Will you move right over there? So I have 5 groups here. Okay, perfect. You guys are fine with 4. You guys are fine with 4. Okay? All right, go ahead. Start, I'll take roll, and then we'll hit it. Hey Jimmy, they got you marked absent for medical and dental. Okay, just make sure you change that, okay?
Okay.
Remember, it's your own opinion. There is no right or wrong. Now, as with any opinion-based question, be ready to defend your position. Okay? Using what 2 things?
Evidence and examples.
Evidence and examples, thank you. Whatever time we have left over, we'll be able to work on our groups for the Cali trial. Once you're done, flip it over, please. We will come back to it. Once everybody flips it over, and I know everybody's done, we'll move on to the next one. Blake, you want to get the lights, please? Everybody read and see okay? Once everybody flips it around so I know you're done. Is this table good? Everybody done over here? Okay, in front of us is today, Think, Pair, Share worksheets. We'll get to this in just a minute. Instead of doing partners, we're going to do it in groups today because you will be working in groups with your trial. So, let's do a quick introduction before we get going. We're going to be talking about war crimes. And we're going to be talking about the 20th century. The big thing I want you to know is the roles and responsibilities of the lowest individual to the nations, the highest nations involved. Okay, we're also going to touch on different types of crime. Crimes against humanity, crimes against peace. We're going to talk about the Geneva and the Hague Conventions and how they will impact your future project. Okay? That being said, here's the most important thing we're going to kick off with, our Think, Pair, and Share. I got 3 things right here I want you to do. Okay? I want you to ask yourselves this. Think about it right now. Ask yourselves, are there rules for war? And if so, who determines such rules? Part 2, who or what ensures that these rules are going to be followed, obeyed, or carried out? Okay? And the last thing is what happens if such of these rules are not followed, obeyed, or carried out, and what happens in the process of enforcing them. Okay? So take about 3 or 4 minutes, write down your own information, share it with a member or your classmates there at the table, and we'll discuss in just a minute. 3 things. Are there rules of war? Who ensures these rules are being followed? And what happens if these rules are not obeyed? Farouk, is there something as unwritten rules?
Unwritten rules, yeah.
Give me an example.
I can't think of a specific example. But
What sport do you play?
Wrestling.
Do you have an unwritten rule in wrestling? Might not be in the rule book, but maybe your coach is.
Like if you're wrestling someone who's like not that good at all, like you don't like to play with them, like take them down and then get them up and take them down, just like beat them up, like you just like do it quick, like pin them.
So you pin them quick without dishonor,
Yeah.
without humiliation. Okay. In hockey, it's an unfortunate thing that in hockey there's fights. And what most people don't realize is there are 3 divisions in fights. You have heavyweight, middleweight, and lightweight.
Mm-hmm.
Heavyweights don't fight lower. Middleweights don't fight lightweights, but you can always challenge up. I think, does anybody here play baseball? What's an unwritten rule about baseball, Kevin?
There's kind of a lot. You shouldn't like slide into a fielder if he's throwing a ground ball, or you shouldn't, like if someone throws at one of your teammates, you should throw back at theirs.
Okay, right. What about, I think the biggest one that I was taught was if a pitcher's throwing a no-hitter going into like the 8th inning or whatever, then you don't take a bunt or take them out. Right. Okay. I can tell you that in school, as we teach, there's unwritten rules. If you were even in prison, there's unwritten rules. Probably the biggest one is you don't what?
Drop the soap.
Well, try to be mature here, but no. You don't snitch, right? That's the worst thing you can do than anything else, okay? So there's unwritten rules in war, guys, believe it or not, and the way nations or individuals conduct themselves. Once you're done, go ahead and share your green answers,
So,
okay, with your tables.
I mean, there are rules like for war. Like you can't use like flamethrowers, you can't use like influence, like gas and stuff like that. Yeah, you can't use like plastic, like
No rules in war.
So there are rules. Like you can make like I don't know, the Security Council, like force of like sanctions would be like 3 years ago.
Allies or your enemy. Less
I agree, and obviously for some of these Geneva rules, there's the UN temple. But I think with the unwritten rules, for the most part, it's just about honor, and that's how they're
Yeah, having empathy and mercy for the enemy. I think for number 3, it really depends. Historically, it's really depended on who has committed the atrocities. Because, like, individual Nazi prison camp operators were sent to
turned red when you're irritated because it's like literally burning your skin.
France to establish the rules. Think about soldiers in war. What type of soldiers are there? What happens to certain soldiers? Think about what might be worse than dying. If you were a soldier, what would be worse than dying?
So that's like, I'd say, that's number 3.
How about being taken
I'm
away?
pretty sure that was mine.
What would happen? What about the treatment? Something to think
Like
about.
massive amount of debt the United States and other countries, like it's like trillions, like $20 trillion.
Yeah, dude. I think it's kind of like so many countries. You know, like the this kind of topic, but like the global economy is like more than what we have. You know what I mean? So yeah, so like it'd be hard to like enforce like money.
How do economics play?
So
How do economics play into rules of war?
Countries that are richer, like the United States, Russia, Iran, very successful. They were putting down all of these things.
Think about a trial. If you're able to afford the best defense team, what's going to happen to you? Is there what? Is there a better what? Okay, so take those principles and maybe apply them to war. Yes, sir.
okay, I don't know if there's any rules for war like along those guidelines, but like let's say like there's a war being fought in like
There's rules for
in
everything.
like New Zealand.
Okay.
Okay, and there's like they have let's say there's a plant that's like essential to their economy. Like they sell like let's say I'm pretty sure Ghana they have a cocoa plant. So let's say it's Ghana, so you can't set fire to cocoa plants. Would that be like an actual thing? Because that makes sense. Like you're going to be destroying their economy. Like there's no point in doing that.
So where do you think that would? So how would that fall into a rule of war?
Like no.
What do you think?
Like no destruction of like economic resources.
But who gets to choose what
Think about just encourage them to break it even more. So then you just want.
Yeah, though if the losing side commits these consequences, there will be consequences. Like the Nazi Guard, the Nazi High Command, they were
going to be in charge of that?
They were
Right now it's the UN.
Whereas
Are you sure?
Well, I said people like
Okay. I need some. Hey, let's dive. See if you can dive deeper.
what you were talking about, like money over there, really makes sense. We have a lot of money.
Well, stop and think. Have we utilized that in the past?
Well, yeah.
I want you to revisit that. I want you to revisit that. Just revisit it. Okay, take a few more minutes, real quick, guys. Take a few more minutes, and then I want one person from each group. I want one person from each group. Doesn't matter who it is, to stand up and share with the rest of the class what your group came to a consensus on. Okay? So, for example, Farouk, Catherine over here, they're going to stand up. One of them's going to stand up and say, "Hey, we don't believe there's rules of war because why? Or there are rules of war because so." And then you're going to tell me who creates such rules and who enforces them, carries them out. And then take it to the last step. What happens if these rules are broken or not obeyed? Okay? And then we're going to expand on the lesson, and then we're going to take and reflect and apply this to our Cali trial. Okay? So take about 2 minutes, figure out who your spokesman's going to be. If you want to have multiple spokesmen, no problem. Okay?
For number 2, I think a better interpretation for it is the UN carries out the punishment, but a powerful nation like the U.S. or China or Russia, any country with political clout ensures that it happens. So that's I think that's kind of more what's asking for.
I think nations in power tend to.
You know what I'm really thinking by that? In the Simpsons movie. Also, they just was quite helpful from those nations, especially it's not even comparable to the Simpsons. Well, what I was gonna say is like that's what
So there are
What do you guys think?
You
ready?
You're gonna be judged, so you better be ready.
I know, you're right, you're right. You're right. I know, you're right.
And then who carries these out?
I know, I'm gonna stop doing that. I'm gonna stop doing that, because you're on
I
it.
just think that for like the
I
second
know you
part,
do,
know, for
I know
the
you do.
following part,
What do you guys
it's
got?
possible for
We
it
need
to
heads up
be broken.
before you go.
So for someone who interprets it as
Or do you wanna
rules
surprise me?
that follow, that's considered a rule.
Okay, give me a second.
Then, you know, it could go like either
You don't think so?
like,
Okay.
It's like in reality.
Now be close, because you gotta defend this.
Country gets sanctions, like didn't Germany have to lose all of their military?
yeah, they could. No, I think it was
Was it World War One? What was it? I think it was. I know after World War One it was, but I'm
they
pretty
weren't
sure
allowed to
after
have
World
like
War
the Air
Two.
Force.
And then they had to use
There you go. I'm not gonna jump on your parade. You're on it. Okay. You surprise me once in a while. I'm kidding. I know you got me, man. All right. Hey, take 1 minute. 1 minute warning. I don't like to end at 13. It's bad luck. So we'll do it at 1:14. I'm superstitious. I really am. I really am. I believe in numbers.
Breaking ears recently.
No. What?
Spilling any salt.
I didn't know that was a superstition.
Walking through ladders.
Don't tell me because don't tell me because then I'm gonna be. Don't tell me because then I'll start doing that stuff. When I was your age for like 20 years, I didn't step on a crack and I was scared as much what? Yeah, well, she was just fine. Okay. All right. Everybody set, ready to go. I'll ask for volunteers first. You want? Oh, okay. Ladies first. First, second, third. Okay, so Kristen, your group is ready? Okay, what you got?
So, for the first one, for the rules of war, a few of us have taken sociology before, so we tied it into the concept of deviance, where there are formal sanctions, punishments, and informal ones. There are formal rules like the Geneva Convention that is codified and put into law. There are also informal sanctions and informal rules, normally having to do with the interactions between an army and either their allies, their enemies, prisoners, civilians, and it's mostly determined by the cultural attitude of the world at the time. And these rules, if they're broken, countries will withdraw support, be less likely to help out in the future, and basically just kind of withdraw. What ensures those kind of rules are carried out and follows? The UN and government agencies like that carry out the rules, but ensuring that the rules are punished is the responsibility, and will only happen if a nation with political clout or soft power is willing to put their backing behind an issue to persecute whichever individual or group broke the rules. And what happens if the rules are not obeyed or followed really depends on who does it, because people like the Nazis that lost wars and didn't have the support of the world once they lost they were captured, tried, and executed. But people like Cali and people like the guards at Abu Ghraib, no country would be willing to stand up to the U.S. and to jeopardize their relations in order to carry out the law.
Okay. Baruch, thank you, hon. Right behind you, lightsaber.
Alright, so to me, like, there are rules of war, and like you can kind of interpret it two ways.
To you or your group?
Well, sorry,
Okay.
there are rules, but like what I was thinking was like there's sort of like two ways to like look at it. So a rule can just simply be like you write it down, okay, that's a rule, or it could be you have all these written rules, and when they're followed, there are rules. Because you think of it like if you have all these written rules and no one's following it, like are there even really rules? So I think yes, because even in both cases, like nowadays, we follow the rules that we have, like, you know, and when countries, like, I'm pretty sure didn't Syria use white phosphorus, like, against people at a certain point?
Are you asking me?
I mean, no, I was making sure, I know it happened, I just don't remember if it was Syria or not. But as a result of that, I think, like, they were, like, put on trial by the UN or something like that, or, like, or they were, like attacked somehow, but I knew that they were punished. So like that's who's going to enforce. Like the members of the UN, they're responsible because they have sort of like a deal with one another. That an attack on one is an attack on all. So that's how you stay enforcing it, because you can't just leave it up to one country, because like with this sheet you gave us right here in the beginning, it's talking about like the
Oh, we'll get back to
responsibilities-
that sheet. Don't
yeah,
worry.
yeah, with the responsibilities of the U.S. And I think that depending on how you answer this, you can kind of be vouching for the U.S. being like the leader of everything, and in that case, then the system's just going to fail because no one has each other's back. And yeah, and that's what I have to say.
Okay. All right.
It was nice.
Right behind you, McMaster, your group, America's finest. I'm a little nervous about this one.
So what we decided was that currently, yes, there are rules in war because the UN pretty much gives out these rules that everybody agrees upon. However, we have mutually agreed that a lot of these rules, not all of them, but a fair amount of them, need to go away, such as there's rules about engagement, where you can't engage the enemy until he's either shot or he's physically taking something out and pointing at you, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense, kind of not preemptive there at all. And also there's many other rules that should be removed, which I'm not going to do, so there's a lot of them. But some examples of rules that should be removed are things such as you can't use chemical weapons on civilians, or any type of weapon on a civilian, like what's the point in that? They're not enemy combatants. Currently, the person in charge, or the group in charge of enforcing and saying what the rules are is the United Nations, which in large part is America, since we pay like more than 50% of the UN's bill. So, which indirectly makes us pretty much, we could just go in and say, oh, if you don't do what we want, you're gone, because we're just going to defund your entire group. There's many different ways that we can enforce.
Stop right there. So we talked about economics. Do you see how they touched on that point? That was a good point. And I want to share with the rest of the group, because I was talking with Mathis and Caroline and Farouk's group. I said, think about going to trial. Okay, think about you're on trial for your life, whatever it may be. What are you going to want? Number one, what's worth an investment? What's worth a lot of money? Your lawyer, your defense team. How do the percentages play out if you have the best lawyer that money can buy? Is that a greater chance of you possibly seeing freedom, getting off the hook, or a greater chance of you being prosecuted? Or is the government going to come after you and want a plea bargain? I mean, think about that. Money plays a role, and we were talking about that. I was talking about that with this group. You hit on it perfectly when you said how the United States and the United Nations, who is in charge of that. Don't think for 1 minute that money doesn't play.
They have to do what we say, pretty much. If they don't, then their entire group's pretty much, oh, where all of our money go, dried up. That's why I think that a lot of the other countries should pitch in. If they want it to be fair for everyone, they got to pitch their money in too. Sentences for war crimes. Many different ways we could go about this. I feel like it would be good for, well, it would never happen if the U.S. had somebody committing a war crime, since we, as we said, pay more than 50% of their bill. They can't tell us to do anything, pretty much. But say a foreign country, or even the U.S., if we had somebody that committed a war crime, we should technically give them to the UN for trial.
I want to stop you there, because you're touching on what we're going to talk about next. Okay. So this group, don't worry, I got you. When I pull up the next slide, you guys will understand. So I want to hear right now, who wants to go next? Okay. Mr. Cassidy. Is everybody ready for this one? All right.
So as a group,
I want to hear you.
As a group, we decided that, well, for me, I don't personally believe there should be rules of war, because I don't believe they can be enforced. An example that one of our group members came up with for a rule, if there should be rules, was to avoid citizens. But as we learned in the Vietnam War, we can't really distinguish who are enemy combatants and who are citizens. Yeah.
But the main point of laws isn't to prevent people from doing things. It's to take people that have committed things, punish them to dissuade others. So if you take away those rules and take away those punishments, how do you know that war won't just into anarchy and no one can get anything done because you're killing everyone.
You don't, but as like, if the U.S. wanted to get something done and had to be through a war, like I don't think we should have to follow certain rules to guide us through the course of the war. I feel like we should do whatever is necessary to accomplish that objective. Yeah, right.
Well, you know what? If we look at World War II, for example.
How about this? Let's stand up if we have questions, so I can hear you. I'm deaf.
So how about we look at World War II, for example? There was Nazi Germany and Hitler who gassed people. And then he never had to pay any repercussion for killing those civilians, none whatsoever. He did, well, he didn't. But, well, some people did. I think, what was it, 40 people that were actually, I think it was 40 people that were actually punished for those crimes. 40, and thousands that were still alive.
Okay. I mean, making a point towards that, the whole concept of like them just following orders, like that's like a very big like issue when it comes to like, you know, how they're treating Nazis.
Hang on, say your first sentence, what you just said. Say it loud so everybody can hear.
The whole concept of, you know, they're just following orders because they're not morally like at fault really. They kind of like, if it'd be morally wrong to not follow orders and to like desert, you know, his army, like that'd just be wrong. But getting back to what you were saying, I feel like when it comes to us, like if we were in a war, we would kind of have to like comply with these rules now, because like we're already like knee deep. Like we've been putting so much funding. Like this is kind of like our baby, you know, like for the country. Like, you know, a nice organization we had, like puts countries together, backs each other up. But if we were to like not go with the rules, then people like we'd have like a completely really worse reputation, because we talk all this like, oh, we're like all about freedom, all about justice. And then when it comes to, you know, the time we're actually tested to see how far our morals actually have come, it turns out we failed. So like, I feel like, you know, I can see what you're saying, and I kind of do agree with you, but I feel like now we're too far, like we're too knee deep, like it wouldn't happen.
Okay, hold on a minute, Tom. Last group, real quick, before we get into part 2 of our level.
So, Nate Dogg, you do believe that there are rules for war, because, you know, you don't want to be able to shoot civilians, you want to use biological gas, and if so, who determines them? So the international community should be able to determine these rules by, you know, like enforcing them with like, you know, like trade sanctions, or having its own criminal justice system where it kind of like it jails people who commit war crimes. That should be really important, so we know that people that do commit these crimes don't get away with it. Yeah, that's kind of what that's just kind of what we're talking about.
All right, good. Okay, so very good. So what I want, let's build on this real quick, and then this is part 2. We got 3 parts, and then we can hit our Cali trial. So Farouk, you really touched on it. You said it's our baby, following orders. You talked on a lot of things. So we're going to take your rough piece of coal that you said, and we're going to turn it into a diamond.
Right. So
what I'm going to do right now is I have a list. Let's turn on the lights real quick. Everybody can see this real quick. Don't worry, I want lights for this. Okay. So let's look. These are major conflicts of the 20th century. Okay? You have World War I. And I tried to do it in chronological order. Spanish-American War. Okay? The Second World War. Okay? First Vietnam War. And when we talk about First Vietnam, who was Vietnam fighting or seeking their independence from? France. Very good. We've got Korea. Now I lumped in all 6 of the Arab-Israeli conflicts. Okay? The Jewish State of Independence in 48, the Suez Crisis of 56, the Six-Day War of 67, the Yom Kippur War of 73, and their invasion of Lebanon in 82. Okay? Then we have the Second Vietnam War, which involves who? United States. After that, okay, we go into what we call modern warfare, which is the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, happened in 1979. We go into the first Iran-Iraq War, 80 to 88, and then we go into the Yugoslav wars. Now I left off several different wars. For example, in between here, we've got a few conflicts. In between here, we've got a few conflicts. And then obviously after Yugoslavia, we've got a few conflicts, one of which is still going on today, correct? These are the ones I want to focus on right now. These are the ones I want to focus on right now. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass out, okay, the same thing that you see on there. And next to each war listed on there, I want you to list any, if any, or all of the war crimes that were committed. Okay, take about 5 minutes. Okay, don't worry about the bottom, we'll get to that. Oh, I'm sorry, gentlemen. One for each group. So, everybody real quick. Everybody look at me real quick. I'm going to give you the first one because I'm in a good mood. So let's look at World War I. What could be a war crime that was perpetuated in World War I? Everybody should know this. Mustard gas, biological agents. There's your given right there. Okay? Does that qualify as war crimes? Well, it depends on who you ask, but for the most part, does the United Nations international community recognize mustard gas or biological? Yes. So I would put that. All you need is one for each one. If you want to add 2 or 3, fine. Just add one. And then what we're going to do is we're going to review. Don't worry about the bottom. We'll get to the bottom. Okay, go ahead. Talk amongst your groups.
The 10th offensive was like war crime because he broke their arms.
We only need.
For the first one, you can put the traps because those were humane population.
The first one is on it. We've got Korean War, Arab-Israeli conflict, Iran-Iraq, so we
War on terror, you can say 9/11. Yeah, definitely.
Wait a minute.
Waterproof. We can look at both sides. The whole time I was looking at just what America's
Peru.
yeah.
I'm giving you a solid nod if you remember that from American History
Like in World War II,
1.
obviously, the
Oh, no,
Nazis.
did we cover that? Yeah.
Holocaust.
Concentration camps. Stop saying so fast.
How about this? Think about this. As with any game, as the game progresses, have the rules changed? Stop and think about it. Has the rules changed? Think about volleyball, right? Did we ever have rally scoring in volleyball? No, we only could score when we did what? Serve. Did the rules change for the betterment, or maybe not so betterment of the game? So think about war. As war has progressed into the modern era, have the rules changed? So maybe what was acceptable 30, 40, 50 years ago, is it acceptable now? And take that and apply it to these. And you should be able to see progression.
Arab-Israeli conflict.
All right.
Is it just like terror?
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm listening.
The weird thing about Korean War.
Okay, so obviously I shouldn't have to tell you about World War II, right? Everybody should get that. One word. What is it? Okay, good. Very good. Keep it simple.
I mean, it's because of Vietnam that we had all these rules. So they just literally pinpointed every single thing that happened, especially like that. You can't do that. For Arab-Israeli conflicts, like, you should go to put that down. Because, like the Suez Canal, they're just fighting over that.
Think about the game of my grandpa's
Spanish American War.
Wait, not Spanish American. I'm talking about
This one I'm not sure about.
Was it during the Cuban War or when we said which ones were?
No, that was for Castro. We tried to assassinate Castro, and we had failed a whole bunch of times.
When was that though? That was during the war?
No, that was a century later.
During Cold War.
Yeah, it's like 1960s. Honestly, I don't know much about the Spanish-American War or the Yugoslav wars. Like, I know a little bit about the Spanish-American War.
They think that U.S.
What do they say?
I'm coming.
Well, what did America do? We can put that down.
I mean, what would you?
Just
Are you asking me or telling me? What do you think? What's your heart and head tell you?
So in the Spanish American.
But here's the deal, and here's what we're not doing here. Are we looking at ourselves in the mirror? Do we need to?
Oh, do they
I would say so. I think that's a good policy.
Yeah, that's why I think there should be no rules of war.
Hey, when you're thinking about this class, I want you to think about 2 things. Okay, number 1, when we talk about terrorism and enemy, think about it. One man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. What about this? Think about Star Wars. Okay, you have 2 sides of Star Wars, correct?
I'm a Star Wars guy. I'm not. You're lucky I'm not talking about Star Trek. Okay, I know that's even worse. Okay, Star Wars. Stop and think about it. Who are the two sides in the Star Wars saga? You have the Empire, the Galactic Empire, and the what? The Rebel Alliance. Okay, is it possible? And, oh, by the way, when you watch Star Wars, who do you root for? Maybe not you. But who we all kind of pull for? The rebellion, correct? Okay, but guess what? Let's put ourselves on the opposite side of the fence. Is it possible that some countries or people in the other parts or corners of the world think about us as the empire? Do we ever consider ourselves being on that side of the fence? And I think we don't. And I think when we go into these next lessons, we need to do a good reflection on ourselves. I'm talking about the United States as a whole. I just want you to think about that. So you're on the right path, but I'm not. I'm gonna let you dig your hole. If I bury you, it's okay, because I'll dig you out. Yes, sir.
I was just like,
I still think that.
And we're going to get into that too.
That part would be, being a sovereign nation. Because we won the war and then we basically just took over.
It's like, this is my land now. Thank you very much. Have a good day. Korean. Something stupid we just I can't remember what it is.
I don't think that was anything about trash.
Okay.
That was
I might show it. Yeah.
The World Wars, obviously.
With John Adams, and then John Adams.
when we're sitting there talking in my mind,
what is
and by the time
this?
we
You're
did
talking about the British and being this is and he yells at Samuel, who's leader of the Sons of Liberty, which could be a modern day son.
Oh, U.S. funded Al Qaeda and the Taliban, or no, not Al Qaeda, I think the Taliban to fight the Soviet Union during Afghanistan. So that could
the Taliban attacks it.
Yeah,
I don't know all the rules before, so I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think funding.
There's a ton.
I don't think funding the Taliban. Do you have a better idea?
I don't truly believe it, but I'm just gonna say, like, what if, like, the United States is, like, like, create this image of the world that's, like, so far off, like, we look greater and all the stuff that we actually see. You don't really, like, I just, that kind of
think
worries
about
me.
that. Well, there's think about this. How many teachers would have the basic understanding?
Like the average person doesn't the average person doesn't know why
that gives me great insight.
aren't experts on those parts of the world.
Obviously
see something.
I mean, the experts of the World Association
when there's no weapons, so I feel like you can really just like trust the government.
What they have maybe valid.
I mean, they lied to us. I mean, they lied to us with armor going into.
So this was
That was after.
That was after the first Vietnam War.
1864.
I don't think so. But
Dude,
I
the
do.
Vietnam War was like 1970.
That was 73. That was in October.
The average person might have.
The 6 Day War.
The experts have the entire country.
Yeah, that's what I'm like.
Is that a
from Syria? No, West Bank or Jordan, which basically set the modern pace of what it is today. Now, 1978-79, Camp David, Menachem Begin and Anwar Sadat finally made peace. Egypt became the first country to recognize Israel, so they said, okay, you recognize us, we give your son. They have done that. Unfortunately, Anwar Sadat was killed in 81. So, even literally put Egypt back to 20 years. So Sami Mubarak, the president, he didn't violate peace, but he didn't
Created some
Now, and then, so the second part of this is, fast forward to 1994, Hussein, no relationship with Saddam Hussein. He was probably the most well-respected, well-educated Oxford leader in the Middle East, and what he did, well, he got his education in Oxford, England. So when he came back to the Middle East, he was shrewdly, he was played all sides, ready to protect himself. So before he even went there, he banished the terrorist group Black September to Lebanon, which creates a lot of things. But he became the second country in the Middle East to say, okay, Israel, we'll recognize you. And Israel says, okay, we'll open up the West Bank and not everybody can. Jerusalem will be now internationally. So far, those are the only two countries. And by the way, both these people that made peace both were killed by their own
Yeah, currently I think that we shouldn't be involved.
Sad status. We should be. Well, I mean, without like military conflicts. There's a lot of military conflicts that we don't need to be a part of, or that we should have not been a part of a while ago. But we've fought so hard to like dig a hole that we can get out of.
But maybe it's like that's the thing. You never know. You never know until after. That's the thing.
I mean, we don't need to be in the Middle East. We went to Iraq to try to find weapons that weren't there. Like that's what I'm saying. Like you can't.
We found out that.
All right, real quick.
Yes.
I'll give you one more minute.
We need it.
Perfect. We're good. We're good. I didn't get over here to you guys. So what you got?
Okay. For the ones who configured in and out war,
And that's good. That's okay.
We're just guessing for targeting civilians because it typically happens in conflicts and war crimes.
Okay, think about Spanish American War. Let's go back to American history too. When we think about Spanish American War, I mean, obviously there's no fighting in Spain. But where did we take on the Spanish Armada? Where?
All of them.
Where we sink all their ships.
So Iran, Iraq war.
What happened? What we do in the Philippines?
We took over, claimed they would get their independence.
Just look into that.
It's like how does it work? If you don't carry out your promise.
We'll talk about it.
What about for Yugoslavia?
Well, think about it. What's going on today, or what was going on in the 90s in Yugoslavia? What was the world introduced? Remember, in 1945, after Nuremberg, the world said never again, right? Fast forward 50 years later in Yugoslavia when it broke up. What was Yugoslavia doing? On a wide mass level. Genocide and something called ethnic what? Boom. Right there you go. I mean, right there. If those aren't war crimes, I don't know what is. I don't know what is. You know, when you force that on somebody.
All right, real quick. At the bottom of your page, check it. Okay, hey, I liked what I heard. Did I get over there to you guys?
Yes.
Okay. All right, good. So we're going to come back to this. At the very bottom, lists the 5 laws. We'll go over this as a group. Do you guys want to go over this as a group, or do you think you know what they are? Okay, how about this? Let's take 4 or 5 minutes as a group. I want you to write down just a quick definition of each one, and then I will give you the definition. Okay? We got the Geneva Convention. Yeah, it's that old, believe it or not. We've got the Hague Convention. We've got the Charter of International Military Tribunal. This should tell you exactly based on the date. Look at the dates. And no, that's not going to be the Civil War, guys, because Geneva's over where? In Switzerland. Okay, good. Okay, and then I want you to look at the very last, well, you got the UN. Obviously, that should help you out right there. And at the very bottom, this is the latest one. And believe it or not, this is probably the most important because for the last 16 years, the United States have been fighting a war on 2 fronts. But ask yourself, how does this relate, the International Criminal Court, the ICC, how does it relate to the United States today? Okay? Take about 3 or 4 minutes. I don't expect you to know but maybe 1 or 2 of these definitions. And then we'll go over it. Okay? So go ahead. All right, hey, how about this? Let me get you a head start. 4 days. For the Geneva Convention, this is what I'm looking for. What could we say, 1 or 2 sentences for the Geneva Convention, for that definition? Simply saying what? How about this? A set of what? Rules or regulations that nations must follow in what? In a time of war. That's an easy 1-line definition. I would put that down if that's what you want to go with. Okay? Now obviously the actual definition's a little bit more than that, but that gets you a head start. Okay? Try and think about these others. Okay? Try and think about it. I want a sentence down. When I come around, I want to see a definition down though. Okay? I want you to talk amongst your groups and then tell me. And then tell me. What you got?
So my what year was it? This was like that in my class was like is the character that American War fought everything.
Is that your last question?
One of these.
Wasn't that? I feel like
One of them said like
that's very familiar.
and then like trying to escape from persecution or something like that. They all.
Oh, this is the foundation for the UN.
You guys are my boys. I'm gonna let you go so I can get you later.
It's the founding of the UN.
Okay, hang on, guys. So there we go. Okay. I was just coming over to. I'm not gonna bust your bubble yet because they were just. No, I'm not telling you. Okay, wait a minute. Oh, you're on the very good. No, I'm gonna talk to you later. Hague's in the Netherlands. It's a city in the Netherlands.
Was that where they prosecuted?
We're in The Hague? No, where are they prosecuting? What's the famous trials, guys?
Oh, Nuremberg.
That's not necessarily.
Yeah.
So that date should tell you. First of all, what has to happen before the United Nations is even created, guys?
League of Nations.
No. Look at the date. Look at the date. If I'm an army, and you're an army, before League of Nations, what must happen? You're Germany. I'm the United States. What must happen before this? In 1945, what did you do to me? Look at the date. 1945. I'm the U.S. Army. You're the German Army. What are you going to do in 1945 to me?
The Articles of Surrender.
Boom. Okay, so when you surrender, what's the United States become possession of? You guys are digging in the weeds. Think at the very lowest level. You're an army. Who do I become? What do I become? If you surrender to me, what is now my property?
The Germans had to surrender to us. And that's when tried all the Germans.
So would that be where the U.S. got control of the Philippines and?
So it's rules for what happens when you surrender as a military tribe.
Was do you have your dates correct? 45 obviously comes. 45 comes before 49, right? So put things in chronological order, and don't get you're getting in too deep of the weeds. Think at the lowest level. Think at the lowest, guys. And then once you establish that lowest foundation, then you can build upon it. Okay, so stop and think. What I was telling them is, I'm the American Army. You're the German Army.
Oh no!
What are you going to do in 1945? I mean, 1945. The war's over. What are you going to do? You're not going to do anything. How does war end? Okay, work. Start there.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, because you know sometimes I'll back you without the whole group. I never like to say that an answer's wrong, but I will tell you there's always more to an answer. Okay? And while you had good points, make sure if you have something controversial or hot topic, don't just stand up there and go, yeah. Oh, yeah, okay, all right. I'm just saying, hey, no, thunder away. Look, you're Shakespeare, this is your stage. Thunder away. You know what I mean? I don't care if you're the only one up there. Thunder away if that's what you believe. As long as you can what? Back it up and defend it. Back it up and defend it. How about this? How about this? Ask me when it's all said and done. When we come back to this, okay? And then we'll talk. All right, guys. Here's the. Hey, man, I was messing around with this. I'm sorry. Here's the definitions. Okay, I'll read it for you. I know it's tight. You don't have to write these definitions down. I just want you to become aware of them. And if you need to reference them on our project for Cali, something to think about, okay? Some of them will relate to our project, some of them don't. But for our next part, I want you to understand this. So the Geneva Convention, first of all, what did it establish in 1864? Well, number one, the Red Cross. The Red Cross. You'd be surprised or amazed at the power internationally with the Red Cross. And where did it get its start? From the U.S. what? Civil War. Okay? And also the treatment of prisoners and wounded and terms of surrender. Okay? What is acceptable? What is not acceptable? Okay? And probably the biggest thing we're talking about surrender is to take what into consideration? Money. Absolutely. Second is The Hague. For those of you who do not know what The Hague is, it is a city in the Netherlands, in Europe.
Okay? This was right before World War I, believe it or not. So what this is up until World War I, wars were a passing fancy. All leaders got dressed up in their military uniforms, put their nice little medals on, and pretend like they were soldiers. They'd go out and fight. 20 years later, they lick their wounds, come back. So the Hague in 1907, what it did is, it says, okay, we're now going to establish rules or customs of war, how we fight, what's going to take place between civilized people, and what rules and orders come into conflict with the public conscience. Okay? As I was talking with this group over here, once surrender takes place, prisoners then become what? Property. Land becomes property. Okay? Now, you are to be treated humanely, and you also can be utilized for labor. Is that what the Japanese Empire did? Did they take it a step further? Probably. Okay, we'll get to that level. Poison weapons are forbidden. Mind you, this is in 1907. When World War I take place? 1914. So the rules of war were established 7 years before World War I took place. Did they follow them? No. Okay, something to think about. Okay. It also talks about unnecessary suffering to civilians and their destruction and pillaging, otherwise known as war trophies. Okay. The Charter of International Military Tribunal. This took place in 1945 after Germany and Japan had surrendered. They surrendered to the Allies. So immediately the Allies began to what? Write up what? A whole new what? Set of rules. Isn't history written by the victor? Guess what we did? We're going to change a few things. We're going to change a few things. Isn't that what the Allies did? They all got together and they said, okay, we're going to change a few things. Remember in 45, United Nations isn't established yet. First, the Army's got to surrender. Then we're going to change the rules a little bit. Okay? And we're going to create new definitions. One is crimes against peace. We'll get into that later. We're also going to talk about crimes against humanity, because up until the Holocaust, never did we see such death and destruction on a wide-scale level. So we had to change the rules. I talked with Paulus Robinson over there. Why did targeting, why was that changed for football, or pass interference? Because what? As the years went going on playing football, what happened? Injuries, right? People were actually dying, paralyzed, right? So they had to change the rules. When the Holocaust happened, okay, the Allies got together and said, we need to change these rules. And they did, okay? Now the UN articles right there, that basically establishes the United Nations. At the time it was 185 nations. Now we're up to 196, okay? And basically they said, okay, these definitions, we're going to go with it, but now we're also going to prosecute. And in the future we want to do what? In the future, we want to do what? So this never happens again. Prevent. Okay, so we want to prosecute, and we want to do what? Prevent. Prosecute now, prevent what? Later. And the last thing, guys, this is in 1998, when Bill Clinton, this is one of his last hoorah gifts, is this is in Rome. They established the International Criminal Court. And basically, everybody said, look, if something bad happens or violates these rules in your nation, then the nation is responsible for getting them, seeking them out, and then bringing them to what? Us. We're the international. So if bad things happen in Farouk's nation, then his leaders are responsible for picking them up and bringing them where? To me. This took place after the Yugoslavia wars, because people in Yugoslavia were not willing to give up their own people. So the international community said, listen, if you don't give them up, then we're going to try your nation. We're going to come back and get you. So you are responsible for policing up your own nation and bringing them to what? Us. But also the International Criminal Court said, we are not going to have the what? The death penalty. This is important because, as we know, in 2004, what happened to Saddam Hussein? Oh, yeah. We'll get into that later. You got a question?
So what happens if a terrorist like Saddam Hussein is in another country, commits a crime? Is it still the nation where the crime took place is responsibility, or the nation of origin of the perpetrator?
I would say nation of origin. It's just like home of record for you guys, right? You can live with your cousin Bill, but if your address says you live in Greenhope, then you go to Greenhope. Say it like that. Yeah, same thing. But with Saddam Hussein, as you talked about, this was pretty dirty.
because the United Nations did not go along with the United States involvement or invasion, the United States said, we're not going to turn Saddam Hussein over. In fact, once Iraq creates their own country, we'll give them to Iraq. Well, we all know Iraq has what? Fidelity. So basically, when the United States had its way with Saddam Hussein, he could not be any more of an asset. What did we do? We didn't kill him.
We'll let them kill him.
But we gave, you bet. It was dirty. But we'll get into that later. So, does everybody, do I have any questions before I move on to the next one? Yes, sir.
So, I was like thinking about it. I couldn't figure out which one. I ended up guessing it. I think I'm right. But like, wasn't there? I think it's the United Nations article, not to parade man, where like countries couldn't turn away refugees that were seeking like religious freedom, like if they're in war, like being killed. Like, let's say it was genocide. Like,
that's part of it. They have some of that in there, but it's worded sketchy, which we'll get into later because, as we know, next marking period when we get into the wars, present-day wars, it's going to come into play. Just like Sam was saying, all this stuff that we're talking, it'll come in.
All right.
Hold on to that. That's later down the road. You're jumping ahead of me. So here's the conflicts that I put down. You asked me, Thomas, for World War I. Okay, these are some of the things that were done. They had ethnic cleansing, the Armenian extermination, genocide. Okay, war crimes, crimes against humanity. Spanish-American War, there was mass political executions, crimes against humanity. Don't forget, when the United States, or I'm sorry, the Spanish Civil War has to do with Franz Franco. And he killed basically all the individuals, okay, that went against his rule. World War II, pretty simple. Okay, first Vietnam, Korea, Arab, they're all right there for you. Okay, yes?
None of those have anything about like the rules against like colonization.
Well, we're going to get into that.
Okay.
Are you talking about what exactly are you talking about?
Pretty much all like from World War I to like to the Korean War. I mean, even Arab-Israeli conflicts. Maybe not the Second Vietnam War, although North Vietnam did go and eventually capture the South. Invasion of Afghanistan, and the Iran-Iraq War. Didn't they like destroy ancient artifacts?
Yes.
Yeah.
So what is that? What is that based on? Would that be crimes against?
Oh, humanity. I see.
Absolutely. Now we talk about a lot of these wars. Do we ever talk about our own participation? Make sure before you point the stick, okay, or point blame at someone, you look in the mirror first. I know we all want to save the rainforest, but before we do that, we need to delouse our own closet. So what I did right there is I did a U.S. recap of wars. I talked about wars in the United States and how this is nothing new to the United States. What did we do in the French and Indian War? We captured Fort Sandusky in Ohio. What did we do to all those Native Americans? Exterminate them. American Revolutionary War. You said it yourself. The Sons of Liberty were a what?
Like pretty much like terrorists. Like, you know, the way we see terrorists, like beheading and stuff, like we were tarring and feathered, which is like, you know, so if someone from the outside, someone from England would do us like as we do ISIS.
You must have looked at my PowerPoint. What about when we executed John Andre for West Point? Remember when we gave up West Point? What did we do? All right, we're gonna hang him. He's a spy. Okay. War of 1812. What's the biggest thing? What did the British Army do to us in Washington D.C.? Burn our White House down. Why did they burn our White House down? Because we burned down Toronto, which was at the time, what was the city called? York. Okay. If we're talking about the Mexican-American War, Civil War, in fact, let's skip ahead to the Civil War. Anybody know about Andersonville Prison and the living conditions that prisoners did? Okay, more people died of disease, malnutrition, and infection than bullets. Pretty much, if you got sent to the prison, you were sentenced to what? Death, absolutely. What about, let's take it a step further, and we touched on this, what about Sherman's March to the Sea?
He burned everything.
Wow. Okay, how often do we look at Sherman? But he's considered one of our most famous what? Generals. Okay, you can go on and on. Unrestricted submarine warfare. We talk about poison gas for World War I. Do we ever talk about the United States? And what did we do? Well, what did we do? Well, we're going to do unrestricted submarine warfare, which means we're going to sink any what? Any ship. Okay? What did we do about World War II? We talk about the Holocaust on this side of the fence. What did American soldiers... And by the way, I'm not saying we're right or wrong. I'm just saying it happened. No. When the first United States soldiers went into these... And we haven't went into this in American history yet, but when our American soldiers went into these concentration camps, we saw German guards
what do we immediately do? We shot them. You know, in times of war, our mind, our eyes see much, but our mind fails to comprehend. And so I think out of spite, out of hate, out of whatever, they just shot him. Anybody was prosecuted for that? No. Okay. Is that victor's justice? I don't know. Okay. During the Korean War, we didn't touch on it, but there's the No Gun Re incident, which means you had a North Korean army that tried to surrender, and what happened? We wiped them out. Okay, we wiped them out. The first Gulf War. Okay, anybody know what the highway of death is? No one knows?
Then we just bombed like entire strips.
When the Iraqi army was set to leave, okay, Kuwait, they get into everything that can move. They go down this highway, and our fighter planes and our everything did what?
Bombed them.
We bombed them. We literally bombed them, and there's nothing left but just
Craters.
not craters, but skeletons of automobiles, tanks, trucks, cars, and bodies just strewn over. I've got a picture later of me in the highway of death. I'll show it to you. Okay, it's a bad scene, but obviously for some of these civilians trying to leave. Okay, what about Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan? What do we do? Okay, or if you really want to go into present day, what can we use in present day Iraq, or what happened early in the war in Iraq? Abu Ghraib. Could that not be considered a war crime? Okay, yeah. So right there's a list of United States involvement, and what I did is I wanted to introduce other countries when they get involved in wars, and it's easy for us to look and judge other countries, but how often do we look in the mirror and judge ourselves? And then when you compare and contrast the United States to some of these other countries, are we right up there? Are we just as bad? I guess it's in the eye of the beholder, but I mean, that's just a relative view. Okay, yes ma'am?
Would you consider Guantanamo Bay and the torture and containment of prisoners without trial to be a war crime?
Under the rules, under the United Nations rules, it's not considered a war crime. And I'll tell you why. Does anybody know? Because they're, go ahead and speak up. Why? Now, I'm not saying I agree or disagree, but the people that are held there, what?
You're not members of the enemy.
They are not considered what?
Enemy combatants.
Enemy combatants. One little word.
But wouldn't they be considered civilians then?
Well,
they
if
don't
a
belong.
civilian takes up arms against somebody, does that make him a combatant? Does that make him an enemy? Does that make him a threat? I mean, the wording of it's kind of like your rights, right? You may drive down the road drunk, you hit somebody, wipe them out, but the police comes over and says, okay, you're under arrest. If he doesn't read you his rights, guess what? You're walking on what we call a technicality. That's could be considered a technicality of war. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, and you got a valid point. So, under the law, no. Personal opinion, yes. Because I was always raised when I went in the Army that we don't do that. We're better than that. We don't do that. And when that happens, it's kind of like when one person makes the entire profession look bad, right? When something happens for a police officer, one police officer gets out of line and what do we think about? Every cop out there, correct? What about when one teacher messes up? What happens to all of us? It's the same thing. So when one person in the military does something like that, what happens? But yeah, by definition, no. By personal, yes. Believe it or not. Yes, I get you, man. Yes, sir.
So you're like talking about how like the United States like kind of like repeats itself, like Vietnam and all and stuff. How like the way like done things hasn't really changed much. Do you think that's because of the fact that we don't look at what we do and like look through it?
Yes, I think it's number one, arrogance, and I think it's a lack of personal accountability. We don't hold ourselves accountable.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Okay, so that was just a recap. Now, for your next lesson, this is moving into Me Live. Okay, so when we talk about our next what's wrong?
Ran out of storage.
What's wrong?
Ran out of storage.
Oh, ran out of storage?
Yeah. There's like 20 seconds left.
Okay. Well, then we're good. You got it all taken?
Yeah, we got it.
Okay, so basically.